Hey, welcome to Classic Performance, and we have got a classic indeed for you today. A 1937 Spartan Executive owned by Triple Tree Aerodrome here in Woodruff, South Carolina, SC00. And we're going to hear from Rob Templeton, our good friend Rob Templeton. He's going to give us a little walk around of this aircraft, tell you everything you need to know about it, and a little bit of the history and the history of the Spartan Aircraft Company.
Hi, I'm Rob Templeton here at Triple Tree Aerodrome. I'm here today in front of the 1937 Spartan Executive, owned by Pratt Whitney and based here at Triple Tree. The Spartan Executive is one of 34 built, serial number 13. It has the Pratt Whitney R985 450 horsepower supercharged engine. It is a 4-passenger, maybe 5-passenger, as it was designed originally, but it was the executive traveler back in the 30s, much like you would see a corporate business jet today. These were well used by the oil industry, and Standard Oil actually owned this as their executive aircraft when it was new, and so Pratt Whitney acquired it back in the 70s after it had been sitting for many years. And has restored it and basically used it at his personal aircraft for many years. So we take it to numerous events such as Oshkosh, AirVenture, Sun and Fun, occasional air shows. So our goal here is to ignite and expand the passion for aviation, especially for children, give them the opportunity to see what aviation can do for them, whether it's pilots, whether it's air traffic controllers, whether it's maintenance. It's just to give them exposure and the ability to see aircraft, touch aircraft, fly an aircraft, to see if that's something they would like to pursue.
So with Rob here, we're going to now take a closer look at the Spartan, and as you can see, it has just a beautiful polished finish, and that polished finish doesn't come easy, does it?
No, it is a labor of love.
So how often, and what is the maintenance schedule on just the polished aluminum and the finish of that?
So at least once a year, it has to be cleaned and polished.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about the engine.
So this is a Pratt Whitney R985. It's 450 horsepower, supercharged engine with a Hamilton standard constant speed prop.
And that's a single stage supercharger?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We're taking a closer look at the Pratt Whitney R985, and is this a nine cylinder?
It is.
9-cylinder radial, and the finish and detail on this, I mean, you can even see it's right here, is just amazing. But this is not standard of how this would have been back when it was new.
No, this has been cleaned up a little bit for more of a show engine with the paint and the chrome. Fundamentally, the engine is exactly as it was, just with a little more detail.
And you've got one inside that is in its natural wild state that we could look at?
We do. Our BT-13 runs the same engine and would be more of a standard configuration.
So just a real quick cutaway. We're inside with the BT-13, and as you can see, this is kind of the natural state of how this engine would have been born. And this is the same configuration, just without the spinner, right?
Correct.
So kind of looking from the back end of the Spartan here, you notice these control surfaces are covered in fabric, and you can hear that versus the aluminum. So why are these surfaces, and it's very, very common in aircraft of this vintage, why were they covered in fabric? And what is the fabric in the process of covering them?
So this is a fabric that is actually applied and coated with what we call dope. And so that is a reaction that happens with the fabric that draws it very tight. So the fabric is put on, it is stitched, and then drawn tight by adding the appropriate coatings, and then it is top coated to prevent UV damage. And so silvers are sometimes just a basic UV protection.
And it also makes them a lot lighter, so it's you don't have as much mass to move for the ailerons and so forth.
Yeah, lightweight, easy to balance.
And then how about the service life of this type of covering versus the aluminum, of course, which would be much more resilient?
Yes. So these fabrics nowadays they quite possibly could be a lifetime fabric. This fabric here has been on there probably going on 15 to 20 years. So, but as long as it is hangered and maintained and has the UV protection, this fabric is easily a 20-year fabric.
So it's a high-performance engineered fabric of
100%.
modern technology. It's not silk. Well, I guess that was back in the day. It was silk, right?
Back in the day, there was silk, and it had a very limited life. Obviously, water was an issue as well. So, but the modern day fabrics are a fabric that really lasts.
Mm-hmm. And then is this all is it wood or is it metal?
So this is metal, and it is what you see there is the stitching on the ribs.
Because some of these control surfaces, would they have been made out of wood?
They certainly could. A lot of planes in this vintage were wood structures, such as the Stearman, which we also would have wood spar wings, wood ribs. But this plane is an aluminum monochrome steel structure. So the Spartan Executive was really ahead of its time, manufactured by the Spartan company, aircraft company. And so, as you can see, it has retractable gear, which was a relatively new concept in the 30s for aircraft. It also is a low wing construction, all aluminum. The vintage aircraft of that day were typically biplanes, predominantly all fabric covered, and predominantly all fixed gear, meaning the landing gear doesn't retract. And so the Spartan Aircraft Company really was ahead of its time. I mean, even in the Art Deco design that was produced back then, it's still a very iconic aircraft. Limited storage, but probably comparable for an aircraft of this size. And so, for several people and a little luggage, it's a good weekend traveler.
And these inspection ports here?
Yep. So, well, not exactly inspection. This is for auxiliary power. So, should you have a battery issue and you need auxiliary power, we can plug in auxiliary power. This compartment right there are the fuel tanks. So we have a main tank and an auxiliary tank, and so fundamentally there's 4 tanks that are interconnected: 2 for the main, 2 for the aux. They hold the same amount of fuel, so it holds 120 gallons total, but they are only filled, the 4 tanks only filled through 2 ports because they are interconnected.
So are these tanks switchable, or are they tied together?
The tanks are switchable between the main tanks in the front and the aux tanks in the rear. So they function the same. Nothing is different between, you can fly off either one at either time.
So you have 2 fuel gauges.
2 fuel gauges,
yeah,
and a selector that allows you to choose which tank.
So taking a look at the inside of the Spartan here, obviously we got some new avionics here, and a lot of things that are still original, of course. So give us kind of just a little bit of a rundown of the control systems here and how everything kind of operates.
Okay. So the Spartan Executive has a traditional panel for its day. Obviously, this panel has been upgraded to some degree with modern avionics, modern radios and navigators. But the basic quadrant is original. The control wheel, as you see, is original, up to the original aircraft. It does have throw-over technology, so the co-pilot can fly as well. But it gives nice leg room when you move it out of the way. And so it's a very well-balanced flying airplane. Flies much better than most airplanes from the early 30s and 40s, just from a stick and rudder feel.
So the starting procedure on this would be what once you come in the cockpit?
Yep. So, obviously you'd set your throttle. The fuel pump would be on. Mixture would be rich. Prop up. Some procedures actually start with the prop pull back, but for this aircraft we do start with the prop up. Boost pumps are on. Primer's on. And then we crack our throttle, and it does have a push button electric start, so this engine starts very, very easily. It is a supercharged engine, so we want to set our throttle and kind of leave it until it's running, but it's a good, strong engine.
And the supercharger has no controls from the cockpit, does it?
It doesn't. It is attached to it's controlled by the throttle, which gives us 35 to 36 inches of manifold boost, and so we use pretty much all the power for takeoff, but it's a very quick power reduction. And so we have to do that to be able to get the gear up and keep our speed low, because our speed builds so fast.
And as far as the horsepower settings and so forth, and throttle setting, has that changed at all with modern avgas compared to the fuel that was available back in the 30s?
You know, I can't say really if that has affected it. This plane we operated on 100 low lead, which is an aviation fuel, and it works fine in today's environment. It's our only option really with the fuel situation. Fuel burn is typically around 25 gallons an hour is what we plan on, and so typically we're running it at about 27 inches of manifold pressure, about 1900 RPM on the prop, and that gives us about 150 knots. The aircraft has much more capability, but it does come at a fuel cost, and so generally speaking we fly the aircraft at about 150 knots. It has been rewired. We run this aircraft as a 24 volt system compared to a 12 volt system.
Now, was it originally a 12 volt system?
I think it was.
All right.
You had asked about the trim tab on the back. So we do have elevator trim, and that is controlled by this little rotating knob there. It gives us nose down, nose up capability, indicated by a little elevator trim over here on the left of the quadrant.
And these are all circuit breakers, resettable circuit breakers down below?
Yeah, so these are resettable circuit breakers. Obviously, we have added in radio and a flight display that the original aircraft did not have. This entire panel was recut, so this is not the original metal that was in the original plane.
And then I see the ductwork down there in the footwell between the pedals. Is that for the cabin heat?
That is some ventilation for the co-pilot. The pilot unfortunately does not have a little ventilation tube there. So this aircraft, again, being a little bit ahead of its time, had stowaway rudder pedals for the co-pilot side.
Mm-hmm.
So you can obviously lower them and gain your leg room.
You tell us a little bit about the flaps, and that's the original data plate. So the aircraft company was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you've got a center flap here too, which you don't see very often.
Yeah, it is somewhat unusual in an aircraft of this vintage. We have wing flaps and center flaps. Center flaps basically are from the outboard of the fuselage all the way underneath, that provide additional speed reduction and drag. We've elected not to use the center flap due to some rudder blanking and high angles of attack, such as landing flares, and so we've just chosen to stay with the wing flaps.
And that center flap doesn't add any lift. It's more of just a
more drag, yeah.
Just a drag or a speed brake.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These flaps are a little unique in that they are driven by vacuum. So the vacuum pump of the engine pulls vacuum on a reservoir that is in the rear of the aircraft. Small tank that holds that vacuum, and then as you deploy the handle, fundamentally the vacuum that has been driven draws the flaps into position. So it's kind of a unique mechanical setup.
So Rob, there were 34 of these Spartans built. How many exist today, and kind of what was the fate of the Spartan Aircraft Company?
Yeah, so Spartan Aircraft developed this plane, started building it in the 30s. They manufactured 34 of these. And so we think maybe there are 20 or so left, maybe 8 or 10 flying. Maybe that's probably unconfirmed. But unfortunately, in the time frame this plane was built, late 30s, early 40s, the company had issues. So did the world with World War II. And so for whatever reason, the Spartan Aircraft Company started developing Spartan trailers. So a camping trailer that you may see as a Spartan may have the same logo that's on the vertical stabilizer there, but it's a travel trailer, and that's where they put their efforts, and that's what the company turned into.
So I'm going to tell you one other thing about Rob Templeton before we go here. Rob's son, Ben Templeton, if you're familiar with Triple Tree and Ben Flies, this is the plane that Ben flew around the country, right?
Flew to all 48 lower states during the summer several years ago. The day he graduated high school, he came out here, hopped in this, and was gone for 35 days by himself and hit all lower 48 states in 35 days.
And this is a hand-propped plane too, so Ben had to get out here and start this himself and
Started himself and climb
hop in and
go.
unbelievable. So
Quite an adventure.
So that's going to do it for our tour of the 1937 Spartan Executive. I certainly want to thank Rob Templeton here at Triple Tree Aerodrome, SC00 if you're flying in, and for giving us a great tour of the Spartan Executive. So that's going to do it for us today on Classic Performance. If you like the channel, you're interested in vintage aircraft, cars, boats, trains, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you as a subscriber, and take care. Have yourself a great day, and we'll see you next time.